That was the point where, despite all of the moments people had said, you're so positive, you're so inspiring, you're still coming to dance class with surgical drains, not exaggerating, you're still coming throughout chemo, all that stuff. But that was the moment where I thought, okay, here's where I stop. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And yet those are the moments in our lives where we surprise ourselves. Because the reality is that while we can anticipate something terrible and not be able to envision how we'll get through that, when that moment actually comes and we don't have a choice, but it's simply the moment we're handed in life, we get through it one day at a time. And we find our way because we have to, because that's the moment where we stop getting, in my case, I didn't get to choose, do I have metastatic breast cancer? I only get to choose how I show up with it and how I move forward with it.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Sally Wolf, who's going to share her journey in life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Dan Gilbert. Part of us believes the new car is better because it lasts longer. But in fact, that's the worst thing about the new car. It will stay around to disappoint you. But a trip to Europe is over. It evaporates. It has the good sense to go away. And you are left with nothing but a wonderful memory. Are you creating memories or collecting stuff that turns into disappointment? Learn to live and experience the moment. You never know how many you have. We're going to chat about that today. But before we do, last week's action step was to spend 5 minutes for 5 days with your kid and be curious and kind and ask, who is this child of mine? Trust me, it's powerful. People would always tell me how the teenage years were hard. They weren't in our house because we actually listened to our kids. We knew who they were and we had their back, but we also held them accountable. And so we had great conversations through those years and as they launch off into life. Today I want to share a story about 3 bricklayers. A man saw them working and he went up to them and he asked them a question, which was, "What are you doing?" The first man answered gruffly, "I'm laying bricks. It's hard work. It's never easy. It's hot. And I barely make enough money and it supports my family." He went up to the second man. He replied, "I'm putting up a wall. It's not easy, but it pays me enough to support my family, and it's not bad work. He went up to the third man, who said enthusiastically, with pride, I'm building a cathedral. I'm bringing people closer to God. I'm making a place for them to be able to live life. All three of them were doing the same work, but each of them had a different attitude. So how does this apply to real life? There's actually a story of JFK visiting NASA for the first time. And while touring the facility, he introduced himself to a janitor who was mopping the floor. And he asked him what he did for NASA. The janitor replied, I'm helping put a man on the moon. That's powerful. What are you doing? For me, I'm helping build a stronger country by helping people to build financial freedom that doesn't require them to depend on government bailouts that hurt the economy, cause increased taxes, and make us less stable. I'm helping people have the freedom to live life on their terms. The reality is you can be amazing regardless of what life gives you. And our guest today is going to share that story. Sally has an amazing life journey. She's going to teach us how to live life through her struggles and her expertise in positive psychology. Sally Wolf inspires others to flourish and live their best lives. As the creator of LightWorks, Sally has combined her 20 years of corporate experience with her love for mentoring and nurturing to create innovative professional development programs designed to enable people find more meaning in both their jobs and their lives. In addition to these customized workshops, Sally coaches one-on-one, both within companies and in her private practice, helping clients to envision and build their best lives. She offers inspirational keynotes, joins powerful panel conversations, and publishes her personal reflections about a myriad of subjects aligned with being our authentic selves and bringing our full selves to everything we do. Let's meet Sally and learn from her today. Welcome to Richer Soul, Sally Wolf. It's great to have you join us today.
So happy to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
What a good question to start with. I grew up in an affluent suburb, Long Island, and while we were very comfortable, I was also surrounded by a lot of peers who had a lot more money. And back in the 80s, $1 million or being a millionaire was a big deal. I know with inflation, that might not seem as big of a deal now, but if you were to visit my high school, you would have seen a parking lot where everyone's first cars were at the time Mercedes, and people were really excited when the movie Clueless came out that it was kind of like the real life Clueless high school. So my perception of money, I think, was warped because we were comfortable, but also there was sort of this infinite money that surrounded me that wasn't my family's story. And quite frankly, I remember feeling grateful for that as I grew older, because I don't think that my values were entangled with money or with having certain things that came really easily to my classmates, and like the fancy handbag or car, or there was a lot of plastic surgery going on in my high school. And it felt very external in terms of where the values coexisted. Like it was money could buy things, which was true. And my focuses, I think, were a lot more about, where I wanted to go to school, what I wanted to accomplish, that really weren't necessarily things that were things for purchase. But at the same time, I was comfortable enough with money that I got to go to a sleepaway camp, which is expensive. And so I remember thinking and looking around at my high school, like, I don't ever need to be this wealthy But if I have children, I want to be able to send them to camp. That was my holy grail of what I needed, because camp was an experience. And I think that's actually, it's kind of followed me throughout life. Like the ability to purchase experiences that are meaningful is more important to me than the ability to have anything that is literally a thing.
So you were ahead of the curve with that, because back then everyone was buying items and they weren't thinking about experiences. And you, for whatever reason, had the wisdom to look ahead and go, I'd rather have the experience than be stuck with fake.
Oh God, not ever a fake person. Like I never understood. So I grew up on Long Island. I have pretty much my entire adult life lived in New York City, and the pandemic is coming to a close because these guys are back, the fake handbag guys all over Fifth Avenue. And I never understood the appeal or attraction of having a fake, fill in the blank brand, like a fake Louis Vuitton or a fake Prada versus just a no name, a no brand bag. Like it didn't make sense to me, but I think back, I'm trying to think of what were some of the crazes, like the childhood crazes. I remember the Cabbage Patch. I'm an 80s kid. So Cabbage Patch dolls. I mean, there were stampedes at toy stores for Cabbage Patches. I did not have one. I didn't want one. I'm sure there were things that I did crave that other kids had, but I don't think they were the more expensive things, or I don't know. I've actually spent some of the pandemic at my parents' house, the house that I grew up in, looking through. This is a fascinating insight into your inner child or former self, which I believe is really still myself. So looking through like second grade and third grade reports and all these kind of things. And I always gravitated to unicorns and rainbows. And I have 2 nieces, so I know that is not unique to a little girl, but I still love that stuff now. And those are, when I think about a rainbow, there's something or unicorn. It's a fantastical kind of thing. It's an imaginative kind of thing. It's not a material thing. So I actually just think it's interesting that even when I would write stories, fables in 3rd grade, it was never about the stuff. It was always about something deeper.
My daughter loves unicorns and rainbows. We have a bunch of them still, even though she's in college, and they still hang on to them.
Look, I'm in my mid 40s. They just make me happy. There's actually, I walk off into Washington Square Park, where there is a big fountain in the middle of the park. And I realized at some point that as long as it's a sunny day, if I walk a complete circle, if I make sure the sun is behind me and the fountain's in front, you can kind of build your own rainbow or find your own rainbow. And what a nice trick to remember on a day where, figuratively, I'm looking for a rainbow that goes beyond the clouds or beyond the rain on a hard day. You literally can do that for yourself.
That's cool. Yeah. So I grew up in Jersey and I had family in Long Island, and you could see the different vibe. You could see literally they were just fake. There was no friendships. Like people were constantly playing power games. And I was like, I don't have the energy to live life like this.
I agree. I am someone who has close friends from every part of my life except childhood, and I had a lot of friends in elementary school and even middle school. And then there was almost like a self-separation where I really loved school. I mean, I was smart, and my mom was a teacher for 35 years. My dad had dabbled in teaching. The value of education was instilled in me. And so I really cared about school. And I also realized as we got older and people were just doing different things and the materialism was more apparent, I didn't share the values that a lot of people shared. But then I also realized I don't even think some of them value, to use the word fake. I don't think they took the time to know what they valued, they being sort of a generalization of a lot of my peers. And so I remember going, I did not have a huge social life in high school. I can probably count on one hand the open house parties that I went to or whatever else. And I remember the first one I went to with a few of my friends, and they all took beer, but didn't drink it. And I didn't understand, well, why are you holding this? Like, if you don't want it, you don't want it. I didn't have it, but it looked cool. And that was the moment where I decided, I don't think these parties are really for me. And I think that's what happened with smoking. There were a lot of smokers on the front lawn of our school. These behaviors that were almost a signal of like, here's what I'm going to do to fit in, or here's how I'm going to show up in this moment. And so my best friends in high school were teachers. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. What an amazing gift to learn from some really, really dedicated women and just mentors, and learn not only in the classroom, but also just get life wisdom from them. And I think the other gift that gave me was just knowing the true value of real friendships and investing in friendship everywhere I've gone. So my college roommates, we are in close touch all these years later. I lived with the two of the girls. We were assigned to live with each other freshman year. We stayed together all 4 years. We added a few to our circle. I have friends from every job I've ever had, from summer internships in college. I was a camp counselor and still am in touch with some of my campers who are now 40, which is mind-blowing to me. And so I would like to think that I would value all of these different circles, even if I had had an easier social experience in high school. But the truth is I think sometimes it takes that loneliness, or it takes that challenge of not feeling like you completely belong somewhere, to crystallize on what is important to me, who are the people that I really want to know, and what feels authentic, going back to that fakeness. Because the number one thing that's important to me in any friendship or relationship is authenticity. It has to be my relationship with myself. I have to be authentic. Like, do I really want to do this, or do I really want to spend my time here, or whatever it is? And then that extends to the people that are in my life. And I actually believe if all of us have some sort of secret superpower, mine is I can detect inauthenticity a mile away because of where I came from.
That's interesting. And you talk about your college friends. You actually went, because of your study habits, to an Ivy League. You went to Harvard. I always challenge the question, college has gotten expensive. The world has changed. And so I always ask people, is it worth it? Is it worth the money? And does it really open doors in today's world? It did in the past, but I don't know about today.
I actually agree with you. And, I'm sitting here smiling because never, ever would I have believed that I would come to the point where I would say that, because I was that kid in 7th grade. I can tell you, when my friends had, pin-up pictures of Kirk Cameron or other teeny bopper stars in their lockers, I had a postcard of a bell tower at Harvard. It was like some goal I set for myself because I had heard or read somewhere, probably US News and World Report, that Harvard was number 1 that year. And I don't even know why I saw it that year. But then, actually, true fact that I've probably never admitted publicly, my bat mitzvah theme. So for reference, for anyone who's never spent all of 7th grade going to bat mitzvahs, people often have themes. And when you grow up in a Jewish suburb of Long Island, 7th grade is like your most happening social year ever. So there were 2 or 3 a weekend. And most people's themes had to do with things that 13-year-olds love, like sports or travel or anything of that sort. My theme was colleges. I sat myself at Harvard. So I had a lot of, manifesting to do there. And I really, really thought that it was a need to have. like, I don't love the word should, but like, I should have been going to Harvard. Like it was Harvard or I didn't know what else. And in hindsight, I did love my 4 years there. Like I said, I made amazing friends first and foremost. I don't know. I actually, even back then, didn't believe I got the best education that I could have gotten anywhere, because the reality is that Harvard then, and I imagine now, you have Nobel Prize winning professors, which is very impressive, but they're not always the best teachers. And I entered Harvard intending to major in physics and applied math. Those were my things. I loved them. My first semester of physics was brutal. I actually did have a Nobel Prize. That was my Nobel Prize winning professor. It was my physics professor. Not a great teacher, not really focused on teaching undergrads. My math teacher didn't speak English. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I was a public school graduate. Like all my roommates went to private school. I was surrounded by international students who seemingly had been doing physics since fifth grade. And it was a very humbling experience. And also that part was a gift because it did force me to get really clear on, well, did I just love physics in high school or do I really want to do it? Right. And I went home though, Thanksgiving and then Christmas break. And I was so nervous and so anxious and worried about my grades and would I be able to even do as well there as I wanted, which I equated with A's. And the only B+ that I got in college was physics. And that was the first lesson Harvard taught me. Thank God I got that B+. At the time I was devastated, but had I gotten an A- or an A, I might have been a physics major. And really, that was the moment where it taught me, maybe there's something else out there for me. And my dad said, I think you would love psychology. And I'd never had exposure to it. And the second semester of physics met at the same time, Tuesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. as Psych 1. So I ended up trying a psych class, falling in love with it and studying it. I will also tell you that even though psychology was better, it was also taught by professors who were doing research and doing all the things that having a tenured psych professorship at Harvard gives you. So where Harvard falls short, where a lot of these big, impressive name schools fall short, is they don't incentivize the teachers in a lot of departments to really focus on and nurture and develop relationships with their undergraduate students. I am not in touch with a single Harvard professor. I graduated summa cum laude with all the honors you can imagine. So from a financial perspective, is it worth it? Does it open doors? I think that we open the doors for ourselves in life. And my network from Harvard is extraordinary. I don't want to sell that short. I think I have at least 3 classmates, if not 4, that are close within Biden's cabinet right now. That doesn't even faze me. You just kind of expect it to be what happens with your classmates when you go to a school like that. But I also now believe there are so many other paths that can get you to greatness. And there are so many other opportunities that didn't exist when I was younger. For example, developing a presence on social media or self-publishing thought leadership that you may have, or just building a network in a way where you couldn't access things in the past. So the doors that Harvard opened, and I really, every big company came on campus to recruit. I graduated and I had 4 job offers that were all impressive. And I had to interview for those, but they came to us. And so I don't minimize that it's been a meaningful part of my journey, but looking back at what I think I thought that brand name meant and how much I thought that I would always covet it or think I would only hire people who had that or had something similar, I actually think that the life experience that so many people get now from another school or even not going to college can be equally valuable. And I actually think that the adversity and the quote unquote failure, like what I think is really life experience that my younger self would have deemed failure, like too many B pluses for me or a C or a D, right? I get that the B plus thing is warped, but I was heartbroken to get a B plus in physics. And so Harvard, I think, at least for me, and there are a lot of other people who are so used to those straight A's and so used to the pressure we put on ourselves to get to a Harvard, that we forget that life is actually the most meaningful and that we learn the most important life lessons when things don't quite go right. And I don't think a lot of people who go to Harvard let themselves give ourselves that permission to trust that a bad grade or a rejection or a quote unquote failure, whatever it is for you, can actually be a really big gift because you're surrounded by other people there who are all used to achieving at fantastic levels. And so I don't think it's as necessary or as worth the financial burden that it may put some people through as I once did.
I've always had a saying, Harvard doesn't make somebody great. Harvard finds great students and takes credit for their work. By the way, do you know Sean Anker?
I've met him once. He was a couple of years after me, I think, but also a psych major. And yeah, we met, probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less. He did a town hall at my company. He's great.
He's great. Well, he talks about happiness and what really is important. And he did a lot of the studies there at Harvard looking at happiness with the kids and so forth. And to me, when I look at Harvard today, I kind of look at it like your high school, all these, well, clearly they're smart, but it's a certain type of person and you'll end up in a certain type of way doing that.
Well, the thing that I've found to be so confusing about my time at Harvard was, to your point about finding great people, I was in awe of my classmates. I mean, truly, truly just in awe. They were impressive. I made tremendous friends as I shared. It was an incredibly diverse group. And I really appreciated that Harvard thrived on building a diverse class, right? On being able to say that we have people from every state or however many countries or, all of race, ethnicity, et cetera. But for all of that diversity that came in, it's almost like there was this machine that then whittled away the differences and spit out. And I graduated in 97, so this would be different now. But at the time, investment bankers, management consultants, which is, by the way, the camp I fell into, lawyers, doctors. A few years later, Teach for America came into the mix. So there was at least some sort of noble service thing. But it was so hard. I had a roommate who really struggled because she didn't really want to do any of those things. And you're a senior and everyone's doing one of those things. And it takes a lot of self-awareness to be able to say, you know what? This is not like these things that everyone's doing after school. This is not what I meant to be doing. And while I appreciate that management consulting was a great crash course in business for me, I'm no longer a consultant. It wasn't my big life purpose. So I do think that there is an interesting truth to, I agree with you. They really, really strive to find greatness. But I also think that they don't do as good of a job as I would imagine some smaller schools do of really helping you really know why you're great. And then connecting that great, that inner great, not that great because you have that Harvard degree, but that great because, like in my case, I'm Sally and like I'm in my 40s and still have rainbows and unicorns. And, how am I connecting that into my life? Like I arrived at Harvard with my bookshelf was empty. And I remember this. And like I said, I'm still in close touch with my roommates. They're dear friends. One of them came. I mean, her dad was a professor, an English professor at Georgetown. She ended up majoring in history and literature. her bookcase was full before we even knew what classes we were taking or what books to buy. She just arrived with books. My bookshelf, when my parents left and my room was set up, had cereal and magic markers. And that was the camp counselor in me, right? That was who I was, like what my room had. That was authentically me. And when I look at my college notes, which I've also come across recently in my parents' house, there's a lot of magic markers in there. It's a lot of color coding and they look fun, right? But we need to be reminded of that in a place that is so big that it's so easy to lose yourself within when, only the big firms are coming to consult or everyone is becoming a lawyer or a doctor. And you're like, I don't know if this is really what's meant for me in this life. And I think that's where if I think really truly about what is the material that serves me best in my adult life in terms of making those decisions that are, that authentically aligned with me, with my, not only my mind, which Harvard does a great job of nurturing, but also my soul or my spirit or my body. It wasn't part of that core curriculum that we all took. And so when you ask about, is it worth it? Is it worth that price tag? If they've incorporated some of the stuff that I'm now alluding to, right? The getting to know yourself maybe becomes a little bit more worth it, but I think there are far cheaper ways, far more cost-effective ways of getting that material. And for what it's worth, I remember very little of all those college classes I aced. Very, very little. And there was a stat I saw like soon after I graduated, right? And it was something like, you remember, it was less than 5%. I want to say it was in the 1% to 3% range. You remember what you learn. And I got straight A's after that B+. I graduated with, a 3.9, all the bells and whistles. But the reality is I was a really good test taker and I was a really good studier and I learned what I needed to learn to ace that test. And I've probably forgotten most of it. And when I think about life is not about that approach. Like that's not how we live our best lives by focusing only on whatever the equivalent of the grade is. Maybe it's for some people a salary or a promotion or, I'm trying to think of like what's the analogous to a grade after you graduate. It's extrinsic and it's not really a measure of what you remember. It's a measure of what you knew on that day that you took that test. And the lessons that become most helpful as we grow up and grow older and encounter real life challenges are, they're never going to be measured by a multiple choice test or a long answer. They're going to be learned in classes where you sit around in a circle and are with groups. And there was one class I took like this at Stanford called Interpersonal Dynamics. It's nicknamed Touchy Feely. You give each other feedback about how you perceive one another and how you come across. And that is a unique and popular class at Stanford Business School because it actually helps you not only to work, but also to live.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, how did I learn this stuff? Oh, yeah, there was the Harvard grant study. I bought the book, cost me about $20 and in a few hours of reading, which is Harvard's research of, looking at people literally over 60 years of life. And then I took a class on happiness at Yale, but I took it for free online.
You took it with Lori?
Yeah.
She's a college classmate of mine.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I love the class. The kids seemed a little stiff, but the class seemed like fun. And it was very helpful. And then I've met Sean. I've heard him speak. I've read his books. So I can get the knowledge that comes out of these places for pennies. Correct. And then I can start applying it. And as you say, and I'm assuming not much different at Stanford going through the MBA. I'm assuming it's a similar type of experience doing that. And I know, so we're going to take a little left turn because I happen to love spreadsheets. I'd love to know what you track on yours.
Yeah, I don't know where that question is coming from, but I have joked in various things I've written or shared publicly that I have a lot of spreadsheets. it's funny because I went back to a business school reunion. So I take a lot of dance classes in New York, and I was known in one case because I made a spreadsheet which really was, to be fair, just an imported playlist from iTunes of all the songs I had danced to, but I tracked it and most other students were not tracking it. And a teacher once was then talking about, well, she once had a student who had a spreadsheet of all her songs, and everyone else was like, oh, that must have been Sally. So I went back to a business school reunion and was, with classmates, friends. And I said, one of them was talking about a spreadsheet. I said, you guys have spreadsheets for your personal lives too, right? And they all said yes. And some of them had really elaborate ones, like, with the spouse, and it had macros, which I actually don't know how to do. But it was sort of like that reality check of, oh, yes, I have different circles of my life, and my MBA circle seem to think that spreadsheeting our lives is normal. And other people just don't do that. And that's probably a nice summary for my evolution in my 30s, because I was it's the right brain. I always get them confused, but I think it's the right brain, right? Like the spreadsheeter, the analytical girl. The math was my favorite subject because there was always a right answer, and it was black and white. And I spent a lot of time in my 30s taking these dance classes where, not from Ivy League teachers, but teachers who changed my life because of their insight in reflection, to use the term, being a mirror to me and helping me get to know myself. And so it's been an interesting journey to appreciate that there isn't always one right answer, and there isn't always something that you can solve for in a formula. That said, I do have a lot of spreadsheets, and I mean, one of the ones I had that may have been a little crazy, but it helped me get situated, was I've been on a 5-year journey with cancer. And when I was starting chemotherapy, and even before that, when I had to decide what surgery I was doing, which for me was a decision between a single mastectomy, so it was a one breast or two, it always went into Excel, right? It's how I organize. So I say I have spreadsheets when in reality, there may not be like fancy formulas driving them or anything like that. But my mind thinks in those cells and organizes in that way. And for the surgery, I remember the list of reasons. There was no medical reason to do 2. I didn't have to. So the list of reasons to do 1 was actually longer. Like I got to keep more of my body. It was half the surgery. It wasn't necessary. But then the second side, that 2 column was, but I am scared beyond belief, and I don't want to go through this again. And so the weight of that, right, that shorter column was more important. So when I say I have spreadsheets for everything, I do, but they're not necessarily the kind that I did a very brief summer internship in investment banking. They are not the fancy Goldman spreadsheet that most of my business school classmates know how to build. And for chemo, it was just helpful because it helped me to track. I was trying to do all these things that I believed were fully mind, body, spirit going to help me be well. So like there was the physical, like how do I take care of my body? Do I eat protein every day? Check. How many 8-ounce cups of water do I have entered in the spreadsheet? And then, did I go for a walk? And then there was the spiritual. Did I meditate? Did I gratitude journal? I will say that was a great way to get started in chemo. I didn't keep it throughout. Once it was kind of ingrained in me, it seemed to border on slightly crazy. But initially, I was very proud of it.
Don't feel bad. I have a spreadsheet for the grocery store and Thanksgiving dinner.
It's just how, right? I think we use that term. I'm actually remembering this. So after surgery, after a double mastectomy, and after so many surgeries, I imagine one has surgical drains in their body. And the way that the surgeons decide when to remove them is when the output, when fluids stop draining. So you track it yourself. And I was tracking it, and they gave you like a piece of paper to track it manually. And I'm like, well, obviously I'm putting this in Excel. So not only did I put in Excel, but I created a second tab, which was the visual graph of the output. And I remember asking my surgeon if anyone else had ever done that. And it was kind of like, well, one patient's husband did it. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't count. Like this is all me. But it was almost like in that moment, I remember thinking, this is how I stay me, right? Like this is how, if I bring a little bit of spreadsheeting or graph making or stuff that I do in my business job into this cancer journey, I'm just me going through cancer. I'm still me. And I think that was as much a part of it as anything else. That's how I knew how to use data. That's how I would track data. So why wouldn't I do it my way?
And that makes total sense to me. Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Do you want to share any parts of your breast cancer journey that kind of helped you get clarity in your life or that might help others?
Sure. So the high level summary for me is my mom actually had breast cancer when I was in high school and she was 46. So I began getting screened really early, or as early as they thought I needed to, which was at 32. And a lot of younger women have dense breasts. So that was true for me. So there was not only a mammogram, but also a sonogram. And I share all of this because I think that these are important things for people to know and advocate for themselves. And we were not positive for any of the genes that have been identified, but we're Ashkenazi Jew, which over-indexes in breast cancer. And so I knew that I needed to be vigilant. And I also knew that I couldn't prevent cancer if it was in my cards, but I could be sure to catch it early because that's all the messaging that I think we get about breast cancer in particular is if you do your annual screening, we'll catch it early. And so when I was 40, I had a lump that was palpable that actually did not show up on a mammogram to the point about dense breasts, but did show up on a sonogram. And there's just that moment that you know, right? And the radiologist, that was December 1st. And then we had a biopsy 10 days later. And I didn't technically know until the 17th of 2015, but I knew by his energy. And I then was diagnosed with what was, after surgery, deemed to be an early stage 2 breast cancer. Like I said, I lost both breasts. I did several months of chemo, so I also lost my hair. I was super grateful to have my dance class through that all because it's pole dancing and it's very much about the feminine body. And so to lose these body parts that are so entwined with our femininity and our sensuality and our sexuality in our society and still be able to get to know a reconstructed body and be comfortable with baldness that was temporary was such a gift. And I encourage anyone who goes through a journey to really let themselves still show up in the parts of their lives that let them be them. And I then was on hormone maintenance therapy and I had a subtle hip pain and I had it about 4 months after chemo. It was so subtle on a scale of 1 to 10. It was like a 0.5. So my oncologist really wasn't concerned. 4 months later, we scanned it. Something showed up, but again, she really wasn't concerned. PET scan then came up empty. So did a bone scan, blood test. Anyway, doctors at 2 top hospitals both dismissed it after 3 scans in 2017 as just my body. Fast forward 3 months later, and my oncologist felt another lump. And here's where mindset really shows up. And it showed up throughout the journey, but especially in that moment. That ended up being cancer. Having a local recurrence when I wasn't meant to have any breast tissue left is the craziness of finishing a bottle of water, having a molecule or two stay on the sides, having, in this case, that molecule or those cells end up being cancer cells and then activate and not stay dormant. Like, you can say, someone could go through the chain of events and say, wow, that's just a lot of really bad luck. Except what happened is that 2 days later, they had me do a PET scan because I had a local recurrence and my hip lit up. Now, this is the same hip that had been dismissed by top oncologists and radiologists at 2 New York hospitals. So that hip was ultimately positive for cancer. My intuition on my body was right. My advocating for myself was ultimately right and so important. But also that local recurrence in my breast was probably life-saving for me, because had my hip pain returned, it had already been dismissed as not anything important, not material. And instead, I had the good luck of the breast recurrence, which told us that it had metastasized. So once breast cancer, it can come back in your breast as many times as you can count and still be considered curable and early stage. And my cancer in my hip changed that cancer journey forever for me, because it was metastatic, it's stage 4, it's incurable. Those 3 words or terms were devastating. That was the moment that I thought, if God forbid it were a part of my journey, that I would crumble. That was the point where, despite all of the moments people had said, you're so positive, you're so inspiring, you're still coming to dance class with surgical drains, not exaggerating, you're still coming throughout chemo, all that stuff. But that was the moment where I thought, okay, here's where I stop. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And yet those are the moments in our lives where we surprise ourselves. Because the reality is that while we can anticipate something terrible and not be able to envision how we'll get through that, when that moment actually comes, and we don't have a choice, but it's simply the moment we're handed in life, we get through it one day at a time. And we find our way because we have to, because that's the moment where we stop getting, in my case, I didn't get to choose, do I have metastatic breast cancer? I only get to choose how I show up with it and how I move forward with it. And I could tell you all the things I did. I kind of quickly went through that list for you and your listeners of, yeah, I got screened since I was 32 and I did the aggressive surgery and aggressive chemo, and all of that is true. And yet here I am. And that is a part of my journey. And so I really have strived in the past, this is over 3 years now that I've been living with metastatic breast cancer. I really had to think through, okay, well, why is this my journey? Or what am I meant to do with this? Because this was not part of my plan. And it's a frightening thing. People ask if you have cancer, which I hope you never do, but the common language of cancer is staging, right? So what people will often say is, well, what stage are you? Or what stage was it, right? And when I say stage 4, the look that I get back is one of sheer terror. And so I'm navigating for myself constantly, how do I trust that I'm okay? How do I know that? And I have been incredibly lucky. I'm on medicines that are working. I've had PET scans that are what they call NED, which is no evidence of disease. So I feel incredibly fortunate that the breast cancer that I have has been responsive to medicines. I also don't currently have a future to look forward to that doesn't involve all of those medicines. Although I've already started to try to talk to my oncologist about, well, when can we try to take a break? And so it's this constant back and forth of, okay, stage 4 is unlucky, but here's all the reasons why I am lucky with stage 4, that I have a cancer that's responsive to medicines, that my cancer only spread to the bone and not the other places where it would be worse, that there's a lot of lines of defense and I'm only on my first. And those are the things that I tell myself. They are all true. And also I live with an intense fear and I get really easily knocked off of this place of purpose sometimes, right? Like I see my medicine advertises on TV all the time. I don't even understand why. Like I can't imagine ever seeing a cancer ad. I don't care. It could be the best ad ever. It advertises on TV. And I'll tell you the people that probably notice that ad most, the people who are on it, who hear the name of that medicine. And all of a sudden, when you're watching something purely to escape and enjoy entertainment, are back into that mindset of, right, thanks for reminding me that one of the side effects of this could be death. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of, I think, skills and self-awareness to really be able to say, okay, this is where I am. Or another example is it's important for me to have friends in the cancer community. But what that means is I lose friends too. And so there are several stories and names I could share. And you can tell I'm pausing because I'm getting emotional because it's so important to have those friends. There's also that realization that we'll probably, unlike my college friends, probably never have a perfect reunion with any of my cancer circles. And I have to remember that every one of us is living an independent and unique journey. And so we're all cheering for each other, right? The best outcome is all of us make it. The reality is the median lifespan for someone with metastatic breast cancer. And the spreadsheeter in me knows that this is a lot of data collapsed that shouldn't be collapsed, but the median is 3 years. And I hit my 3-year mark on April 11th. And so I had to really, say, okay, look, I know that this number is not my number. And how lucky am I that I'm here and I'm well and I'm healthy and all of that good stuff. And that's where I try to focus. But the truth is, I will tell you, it is a constant rebalancing, or if, think of a seesaw analogy, it's a lot of work to stay in a healthy place, because there's a lot that also goes on behind the scenes that has nothing to do with cancer itself, but like every day, seemingly there's like something from insurance, or medicine has to be delivered or reordered, or, a bill or a scheduling thing or whatever it is. Or you see a news story about a celebrity that has breast cancer or has died for breast cancer. And so or October, which I actually appreciated in the pandemic, that the world was a little less pink last year in October. And while I benefit from all the years of awareness campaigns, I also get triggered by walking into work and everyone's wearing pink because it's wear pink to work day. And I'm like, okay, like I'm just trying to do my job here. So I will say that there's a lot to navigating this journey, and yet a lot of silver linings that come with the scars. And so I try to focus on those to keep me living from a place of what is in this for me to share with others, and what is in this for me to live my best life.
Is this what led you to the positive psychology and what you do now?
Yes. So I had dabbled in positive psychology, which high level, if anyone is listening and doesn't know what it is, it sounds like it's this psychology of happy faces, which is sort of the base level of it. But really, it's the science of human flourishing, which takes that base level of happiness, but also says we're not always going to be happy. So there's the positivity of emotions. There's the learning about mindset and how we really can go through life with the mindset of growth and find deeper meaning and purpose and find more passion in what we're doing without even changing what we're doing, right? So short term, if you can't get a promotion or get a raise, how can you know yourself better to just show up at that job and find deeper meaning and purpose and passion and flow within it? And so I had been a psychology major at Harvard. I graduated in 97, and positive psychology was born as a school of thought in 98 at UPenn. So I kind of just missed it. So with that trust that we encounter things along our journey when we're meant to, I had in my adult life really gravitated toward psychology when it presented itself. So for example, TED Talks, like Brene Brown, before she was everywhere, she had a TED Talk on vulnerability that was a personal favorite. And Oprah's Super Soul, and just the work that Oprah did by starting OWN. I worked in the media industry, and I kind of knew if I go anywhere else in the media world, it's going to be there, because that's what's aligned with me right now more than anything else. But I hadn't studied positive psychology in depth. And then one of the silver linings of cancer for me was medical leave from my corporate job and a positive psych class that I had had my eye on for a long time, which just felt like too big of a time commitment while working. I had a lot of time on my hands, and chemo was every other week. So I took this course, and it was really a deep dive. It was basically a parallel to the MAP program that's at UPenn, which is the holy grail kind of this, but a little bit like the Cliff Notes version. It was CAP, not MAP, and it was a certificate, not a master's. But given all the other psychology I had studied, I felt like this was the right level that I needed. And so I took this coursework, and I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford in 2005. Just 2 years after I graduated. So I always will wish that I had seen this one live. But one of the things he talks about is how we can only connect the dots of our lives in the most meaningful way by looking backward. And what happened was when my cancer returned, I needed a corporate job. I was on Cobra for my last job, and I needed to know that I didn't have to worry 6 months later that I would have to go on some market plan. The then presidency made me a little bit weary about what might happen. And I ended up, for the first time in my life, taking a job initially that was purely for healthcare. It wasn't a job I took because I wanted that job. It was a job that I took because I needed to be an adult, and I had medicines that were going to be like $15,000 a month and scans that were expensive. And again, that was that point of choosing to see the good luck. How lucky am I that I have skills and that I have a network, because it was a former colleague who hired me. How lucky am I that I don't even need to worry about this, right? That I could find something where I don't have to worry about the healthcare. And so I took this job at NBC Universal, and it was doing media strategy, just like I had done for 20 years. But I brought all the positive psychology that I had studied over the past several years into that office. And people started to notice that while it wasn't part of my, quote unquote day job, people noticed a change in some of the people I was working with, because I was bringing these skills that I knew were important, that I knew could help develop the junior team or help a senior leader be a better manager, into the workplace. And so ultimately, I put my head together with a senior executive, and I pitched HR on, I think this could be a really valuable thing to offer to your employees. And I think this nicely fits. If you think of almost like a puzzle of what your employees get, you're giving them wonderful benefits. Right? That's why I'm here, because of your benefits. So you have amazing medical benefits, amazing stuff of that sort. You also do professional development, but for most companies, professional development is tied to your skills. Like I would say the things that go on your LinkedIn or your resume, the things that help you do your job for your company. Professional development is not usually tied to who you are as a person. And some companies, and NBC was one, had wellness days, which often were things like get a manicure in a conference room. But they were one-off, and they were few and far between. And so I said, what if there's another piece of that puzzle? And it's all about personal development. And it's all about self-awareness. And when you offer employees, and this is all basically stuff that falls under positive psychology, and when we offer that to your employees, they get to know themselves better. They get to show up better for work. And by the way, here's what's in it for you as a company. And there's data on this. There are spreadsheets on this. You reduce your turnover. You reduce the absenteeism and also the presenteeism, which is showing up but not really truly being there, right? Like you're emailing your friends all day or playing on social media. You increase profitability and creativity and innovation because you really have people showing up to be their best selves. And so in the spirit of serendipity, so the company said, yes, this was an amazing gift. I taught my first workshop in person, March 11th, 2020. That was also my last day in the office. And what happened was the pandemic in this sense gave me a tremendous gift, because what would have probably been a very slow rollout internally, because that's just how big companies are, very quickly became wow, everyone needs this. Let's offer this to everyone. So I quickly created a curriculum and taught hundreds of employees all about practicing gratitude and how that can help recenter you and help you move through this pandemic with more positivity. How to know your strengths, which are different than your skills. And when we literally play to our strengths, we not only flourish in great times, but we also get through challenges better. And a class on meaning and purpose and all these different things. And it was really making a difference in employees, not only in their jobs, but also in their lives. I had one woman reach out and tell me she was pregnant with her first child, working from home. And some of the things that I was teaching, she and her husband were enacting in their day-to-day lives just to get by. And then we took me broader into the bigger company and led a meditation and led sessions for Comcast, NBC Universal, which is 50,000 people. And there's your New York City siren, if you're hearing that in the background. And then basically this was always meant to be a pilot and something that, I was only hired as a short-term stint there. So we kept it that I would be a partner for them. They would be my client. And they gave me a tremendous gift, which was, this is great. This is something that should exist in the world. Go take this out there. And it is not often, I've had a 20-year corporate career, that companies are that generous. But they gave me the permission and the gift and the freedom to actually to be an entrepreneur right now. So what I've been doing since I left there last fall is building my company and bringing positive psychology-based workshops, one-on-one coaching of employees, storytelling workshops, because I think part of the way we get to meaning and purpose is to really own our stories. It's what I've done with cancer, and I've done public speaking. And I also think it's just an asset for people to learn to tell their stories. So I now bring this into companies and schools and just the world at large. And in the spirit of that Steve Jobs, we only can connect the dots looking backwards. This is the obvious way to connect my dots of being a camp counselor and getting a master's in education alongside my MBA and really knowing companies, because a lot of people know positive psychology, but I spent 20 years in the corporate world. So I actually can go into a company and not only know the psych part of what I'm sharing, but also understand how to use that in the day-to-day of a company. And then the cancer journey is a meaningful dot along the way, because to teach resilience, I believe it's helpful to have had to be resilient. And before cancer, I'm sure I had small bouts of resilience, but it's only been in this journey that I've really, really learned the meaning of that word. And then NBC Universal, that job I took for healthcare, ended up being the pivot, the meant to be pivot of my career, where I stepped into what feels like a calling more so than a job or a career. And that's a gift.
it is very much a gift to find your calling. And it's only been in the last few years that I've also been able to do that. And it's just like you said, it's looking back and connecting all the dots. And it is an amazing, amazing place to be. So we always like to ask for an action step. What's something people can do this week to take a step forward in their lives?
Going to tell you about a very brief study that was done on janitors in a hospital. It was done in Michigan. And the reason it was done, this goes back way before COVID, in 2003, I believe. Some janitors at hospitals were showing really, really high levels of feeling purpose in their day-to-day, and others weren't. And the janitors who felt deep purpose, when a psychologist probed it, when they were asked, "What do you do?" they weren't answering that they cleaned floors, although that was part of their job. But the janitors who felt purpose, when asked what they did, they said they helped people to get well. They helped heal patients. And that is effectively what purpose is all about. It's connecting to the bigger world that is out there, whether it's one person at a time, whether it's, a community or whatever it is. So one thing that I believe that is almost the bigger thing that people can do this week is to, often we think about purpose as something we need to find, and that gets stressful because it's like a noun. It's like I either find it or I don't, or it's here for me, or what if I lose it? But purpose is really about discovery, and it's a verb. It's an action. You're discovering or uncovering. So a step that people can take this week is to think about almost the little P of purpose, which is how you use your skills day to day to help, right, what you're contributing. So for the janitors, that little P is maybe that cleaning of the floors. But then also think about your bigger P and get creative with how you think about that. And so, for example, when I was at NBC, that was helping connect the dots for a junior employee who may be crunching numbers and not ever touching any of the things that get on air, but really understanding that they contribute to entertaining everyone through this pandemic, or helping the news get to someone, or whatever it may be. Or for other people, that purpose is about, it's something tied to family. It may not be tied to a job. So that's like a really big thing. And then a littler thing is a gratitude list, 3 things each day, morning or night. They can be small things, but just priming yourself for gratitude, I find, helps you find more moments in each day to feel grateful for.
And that's wonderful advice. I think we all need, the fact that we're listening to this puts us in the top percentages of the world. And I think we don't act like it. And so it's so important to take the moment and to be thankful and to have gratitude for what it is.
Agreed. And when we really are able to, and the best thing to do for a gratitude list is to be specific. So someone might feel grateful for his or her family every day, which is awesome. But we habituate to things as humans over time. We're tough customers. So like, for example, you might have beautiful artwork on your wall, but if you walk by it every day, you stop appreciating it in the same way. And so to write you're grateful for your family every day almost loses something because you just know you're going to write it. But feeling grateful that I spent this weekend with my nephew and nieces and got to sleep over at their house. And, during COVID, that's been more difficult. And so that for me on those days, having them run into my room in the morning and all the stuff we did, those were the specifics that really, really primed me for being able to savor those moments and just write them down on that list. So really, really getting clear on what we're grateful for helps us to remember that there is almost always something to feel grateful for, even on a day where we are struggling with sadness or angriness or anger or loneliness or whatever else it is. They can coexist. and it's how it can make our day a little bit better.
And they're all little things. They don't need to be these big, massive things at all.
Completely agree. I mean, it can be like, I don't know. I mean, you finally got an iced coffee at Starbucks that you hadn't had for however long during the pandemic. And how great was that? Or, it really doesn't have to be a big thing. I do strongly encourage you, though, to make sure it's authentic to you, right? So and this is really about that self-awareness piece, because even as I shared my cancer journey and the way that I found silver linings and the way that I've made meaning of that journey, that's how I've done it. Someone else is going to have to go through that, very, very similar journey, may have the same scans, the same whatever. And like, that may be harder for that person or easier. And so it's just getting clear on which parts I think for each of us are authentic. And I think that the way that we do that is sharing in like the biggest sense of how do we connect with one another is sharing our stories, because you asked earlier about the value of that Harvard education. I think right now, the best way to learn life lessons, which, as I alluded to earlier, I think are far more valuable than most of what I learned in college, are things like your podcast and the books that you have behind you and the one you shared earlier, right? It's how do we learn from one another? And the beauty of that is technology has made that accessible to everyone in a way where it's free or close to free in most cases. And what a gift is that for all of us. And so, gratitude could be learning something from a podcast you listen to. It really can be so small. It can be, really anything. Sunshine, literally. I'm happy it's a sunny day. So simple.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I think the secret to abundance is the belief that it exists, that it already is a part of my life. And the way that I do that is to trust that there are many different buckets, for lack of a better word, of abundance, right? So it could be a family bucket, it could be a career bucket, it could be just being able to notice the beauty outside when I go for a walk. And so when any one of those pieces is threatened, like the health journey that I spoke about, I can find it in other places and know that it is safe and it is there for me, and that I can continue to invest in it and grow it.
It's always there. We just have to go find it. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
What a good question. So what I learned later in life, what I still learn every day is, and I wish I had known sooner, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. And I think when we strive for perfect, we miss so many of the things that are the best parts. And so I think about my cancer journey and the scars and the moments that life got really rough. And it also let me connect in an even deeper way with other people, because it wasn't about perfect. It was just about connection and vulnerability and depth. And I think perfect gets in the way of all that other good stuff.
Life is very messy.
is very messy. I'm still learning to dance in that mess.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
If I were talking to any 18-year-old, I could go back and talk to myself at that age, it would be to really look inside yourself and regularly take stock of what you were doing and whether it truly aligns with your soul, and not worry about what will so-and-so think if I leave this job, Or is this what I should be doing? But just really, really getting clear on what lights you up. And even if it's not the conventional path, just trusting that it's meant to be your path. And that a shorter way to say that is like, even if it's weird, your weird is your wonderful. We're going back to what we were talking about, your rainbows, your unicorns. If you don't want to give those up, don't give them up. Figure out a way to make them part of your adult life. Because by the way, there are other people who are going to love and adore you because that's what you're bringing. And because you stayed true to yourself.
And we've encouraged our kids to do that. We'll see how it turns out, because one is at that 18-year-old time frame, and the other one's a couple of years older. So we'll see whether we can hold true to it. If people would like to find more of your work, connect, and so forth, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is my website, which is Sally Wolf, SALLYWOLF.com. There are links there to all of my social, and you can subscribe to my newsletter as well. I try to post a lot of fun pictures on Instagram too, which is Sally Shoots. They do actually involve a lot of glitter and otherwise inner child kind of bursts of fun. And I really strive to inspire with that account.
And I love how you do the inner child. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's amazing to look backward and see how all the dots are connecting to today. For me, it's been an amazing 40-year look back. Finally, I brought it all together. I love how Sally still has kid-like joy. I do too sometimes. I got to enjoy childhood raising my kids, and I will again when I have grandkids. It's fun to just be. I think we take life too seriously. Cancer's not fun, and I've had too much tragedy with it close to home. None of us are immune, but we can take choices to live a healthier life. This week's action step: think about the little P of purpose, which is how you use your skills each day. And then think about the bigger P and get creative with how you think about that. And what's your bigger purpose? We're back to where we started. Are you laying bricks or are you building cathedrals? And work on a list of gratitude, 3 things a day to just be thankful for. We have so much and we take it for granted. So what's your attitude in life? Is it the little P or the big P? Makes all the difference in the world. Remember what Sally said. Things don't have to be perfect. When we strive for perfect, we miss so many of the best parts. Next week, we've got on Dan LaFave. He's going to talk to us about how to live the life of your dreams, continuing that theme. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd appreciate if you share it. And when you do, tag me. I'd love to be part of the conversation. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.